This is the Investor Connect podcast program. I'm Hall T. Martin. I'm the host of this show in which we interview angel investors, venture capital, family offices, private equity, and many other investors for early stage and growth companies. I hope you enjoy this episode. Hello, this is Hall Martin with Investor Connect. Today we're here with Pieter Dorsman of Angel Forum and eFund. Pieter, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Great. So what was your background before investing in early stage companies? What did you do before this?
Well, I was an investment banker. I started my career in London, in England, doing corporate finance and then working for Barclays Bank. And then I moved to Hong Kong for Barclays, doing large corporate finance transactions all across Asia. And after a few years, I stepped over to UBS, the largest Swiss bank, sort of well-rounded person in finance. And around 2000, my wife and I moved to Vancouver to start a new life and used our financial skills to start working with technology companies. And that is sort of how I rolled into sort of angel investing and angel financing. But yeah, my background's sort of in big ticket corporate finance. And what I always say is sort of now we're doing deals of $2 million, and I used to do deals of $2 billion. The largest deal that I ever did was $2.6 billion US dollars. And it was a power plant in Indonesia. But I always explain to people that the principles are the same, whether it's 2.6 billion or 2 million. It's the same sort of allocation of risk. It's the same level of negotiation. It's sort of getting acquainted with the people involved in the deal. It's all these same processes. Doesn't matter what the amount is. It's the same sort of skill set that you use and need in order to do an angel investment deal.
Well, that's a good point. So what excites you right now?
Well, what excites me, I was actually last week, I was in Israel, in Jerusalem, for the Our Crowd conference. And I would say Israel is sort of second after Silicon Valley in terms of sort of tech and invest hotspots. And very clear where the trends are at the moment. It's most of it is in AI and data, a lot in cybersecurity, and fairly topical with the coronavirus. A lot is focusing on life sciences and health startups, which was the case anyway before the virus came along, right? We see lots of life science companies spanning all the range from biotech to mental health apps to medical devices. So I would put sort of these two big buckets, sort of life sciences on the one hand, on the other hand, sort of AI and data.
Well, very good. So what's your advice for people investing in startups? What do you tell them to do before they write that first check?
Oh, well, that's a great question. I mean, the first thing, and that's what I've learned more or less the hard way. I think the most important part to realize that you're in it for the long haul, and you're dealing with people who are working under a great amount of pressure. So it comes down to the people. So what I tell anyone, new angel investor, I say, get comfortable, not just with the company and the technology and the business plan, but with the people, right? Learn, get to know the founders, get to know the entrepreneurs, go out with them for dinner, have a coffee with them over a period of time, right? I was at an event not too long ago and someone said, hey, this deal is so cool. I'm going to write a check into that company. And I was like, well, don't you want to get to know the founder a bit better? Don't you want to know and see how they operate in their various circumstances and get a bit of a feeling? Because at the end of the day, you're investing in people. If the technology doesn't work out or the markets change and the company has to pivot, you're banking on the people to write that change, to make those changes and pivot the business in another way. And you go through many ups and downs, so you better be sure that you're, as an investor, you're in a very good relationship with the entrepreneur. And I think that is sort of the essential piece that I would give to any investor.
And so on the other side of that table, what's your advice for people that want to launch and run a startup? What do you tell them to do before they launch that company?
Before you launch a startup, well, I would sort of certainly investigate sort of what you need, right? What do you need in terms of resources to get your idea off the ground? Do you need developers? Can you do it on your own? What is it going to cost you? And how long are you able to go without a salary or without money, right? Because it takes a long time. It's interesting. I see a lot of people, and this is one of the things I talk about a lot, is this is image that startups are run by young people, but I see more and more people in their 50s and 60s after a corporate career or after the kids have gone, start their own company, start a new tech company, and invest quite a bit of their life savings. And it often ends up being more than they had planned to, because it always takes a bit longer to get something from A to B. but really sort of plan your financial resources and see how quickly you can get a product ready that is financeable. Because investors don't invest in ideas anymore. They invest in something that is ready to be taken to market and ready to be financed that way. My first angel investment, we raised $1.5 million. That was about 18 years ago. $1.5 million to build a piece of technology, right? Now you raise $1.5 million to scale it, to take a piece of software to market. So that has really changed. So you got to have a product ready that can be financed and taken to market. And you need to figure out what it's going to cost you to get there.
Well, the world of startup investing has changed a lot over the last 10 years, but how do you see the industry evolving for startups and in particular for angel investing?
Well, what I see happening is sort of you get a lot of companies in different sectors. It started out with software and biotech, and now every other sector in the world, you'll see incredibly interesting startups. But you also see tons of capital coming out of different areas. Angel investors was a very small group. It's gone mainstream. So you see many different angels, but you also see many different angel funds, especially for people who cannot invest a large amount of money. They can participate through a fund. And then you see a lot of collaboration, what I've seen over the last few years, across geographical boundaries. The last financing I was involved in had people investing from Europe, people investing from the eastern part of North America and the western part. So there's a lot of collaboration, which means you can do deals much quicker and you can be much more successful in leveraging sort of the expertise that exists in different geographical areas. Because don't forget, all of these startups need to go to market. So if you can provide them with money, but also with access to different geographical markets, that will greatly contribute to a rapid success for a startup.
So what is the investment thesis for your E-Fund and for the Angel Group? What do they invest in specifically? In particular, what is their criteria?
Yeah, so we invest in product-ready companies. So whether you're a life science or clean tech or software, we want the product to be ready. So we're not investing in ideas or concepts. And we want to see a bit of early traction, be it through a pilot or some early revenue. And that's the seed stage that we invest in. The specific thing about our fund is that we have like about 120 angel investors now invested in the fund. So we have the due diligence done usually by 3 people out of the group. So we have all the expertise in the group present. So we have life science people, we have some clean tech people, we have some cybersecurity, software, hardware people. We have all the skill sets pretty much under our roof. And out of the 120 or so investors, I would say about 20 to 30 actively participate in doing the due diligence and coming to an investment decision, which they recommend to the board, which I'm on the board of. So we follow really sort of what the expertise in our fund is saying. And the other 90 shareholders that are not actively involved in due diligence, they're just there for financial reasons and they want to see a financial return. But it's great to have active members who have the specific skill set, because I don't know everything about biotech, but I know in our fund we have a few people who know it inside out and can make the right judgments or better judgments when they're analyzing a startup that we're about to invest in.
Great. Can you talk about 1 or 2 startups that fit that thesis that you funded that you're excited about?
Well, we just financed a software company that is sort of automating processes in sports organizations, the membership, but also the events. And they've been working across North America, signing up a lot of sports organizations that are still sort of, a lot of them actually, notably in equestrian, are paper-based or using Excel to do their memberships. So what they offer is sort of not just sort of an automated process for membership registration and event registration, but once you have that user in your system, there's a lot of other things you can do with them. So, for instance, signing liability waivers, selling them insurance, selling them merchandise. So there's a huge pool of sports people across North America who really participate in different organizations, in cycling, running, horse riding. And we're growing the company. The company is called Interpodia, and they're building that user base by going through all these sports organizations, first often on a national level, but then going down to the state and provincial levels and sign up to membership organizations. And the attractive thing is, of course, once you're inside an organization like that, it's very rare that you get kicked out as a software provider. You're going to be in there for a long term, and you can increase your revenue by offering sort of multiple services to that user base. So we were very, very excited about that. that company is going very, very fast. And I invested myself personally, and the fund invested in it. And we've got investors from all over North America. So that's a great success story that we're very pleased with. But again, like I said earlier, what attracted us primarily was sort of not just the business, but the founders. They're two relatively young immigrants who've been work at this 24/7, very coachable founders, good to work with, and we see great results from that because it's a great technology in a great market with a superb team. So, yeah.
Well, great. So, what do you think the challenge you see most startups struggling with today to launch their business? Is it the regulatory? Is it the market? Is it technical? What do you see them spending their time on?
Well, for a lot of startups, it's very hard to go to market, right? It's not very hard to come up with a technology if you're a bright individual or you come out of an industry where you see a certain problem that you want to solve. It's very hard once you got your product ready to take it to market, to sell a piece of software, in the enterprise world, or when you're doing B2C, where you have to go after the consumer market to scale it across a large user base. That is where a lot of companies fail, I think. Or they can take it to a certain level, to a few $1 million, but then to break it and to really scale it into sort of 10, 20, 30 to $100 million company. That requires very different skill sets very often. So that's where you see a lot of the original founders peel off, and where you have to bring in senior executive management with the right skill set. I would say the go-to-market is the biggest piece. Regulatory, if you have the resources, that can be overcome. Building the technology can be overcome. Go-to-market, raising money you can do if you've got a good product and a good team. But getting to market is sometimes where I see a lot of companies struggle. And then it takes longer. And if it takes longer, then you have to raise more money. And that can be dilutive to your original shareholders and to yourself as a founder. So yeah, I would pinpoint to that as the single most critical issue. So that is why, as an investor, if you can bring sales, marketing skills to the table to help the company, or make introductions, or use your reservoir of connections and experiences in other startups to help the company get to market, that is almost like an essential thing these days.
Great. Well, you see a lot of sectors and applications out there. If you had to pick one or two that you think are good immediate opportunities for investors to pursue, what would you call out?
Yeah, like I said, AI. A lot of companies use the term AI, but I think to market themselves, but you really have to drill down. Are they really involved in artificial intelligence? Are they really sort of able to leverage data set to come up with better, efficient business process? That is where I would spend some time. And like I said, with Interpodia, like industry, there's so many industries that do things the old-fashioned way. Overall, even last Friday, we saw a fintech startup that enables very fast wire transfers between individuals and between businesses, sort of going around banks. Things like that, where traditional industries get disrupted by relatively simple processes, but just having to have the entrepreneurs that are coming up with a solution to revolutionize the way that business has been done in forever and change these processes. I think that's where I would definitely look.
Well, great. Well, in the last few minutes that we have here, what else should we cover that we haven't?
Well, we can talk a little bit about what an investor can do after the investment, right? So I'm a very big champion of building a relationship, making the investment. But as I alluded to earlier, you should stay involved with the company as an advisor, sit on a board or as a mentor in any possible way to ensure not only that the company is successful, but also that your investment in the company gets to a multiple that is sort of gives you the reward that you seek from the investment. And I get involved with a lot of companies through our fund. We have over 30 investments now. There's a number of companies that I'm actively involved with, just sometimes with brainstorming sessions on the strategic direction of the company, but sometimes also just a phone call on when they're dealing with a small operational issue, which for me, having like 35 years of business experience, is fairly easy to address. But for younger people or for people who haven't dealt with it before, it's a struggle. So anywhere where you as an investor or as an investor group, an angel group, can help your portfolio companies move forward, I think that is essential to build a successful portfolio and to see the rewards from your investment as you anticipated them.
Well, that's good advice. Well, how best for listeners to get back in touch with you?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn. I also have an email address that you can email me on. It's Pieter, Pieter at Redpeaks, REDPEAKS.com. And feel free to email me with questions or new deals or introductions. I'm always happy to look at stuff. And if I can't help, I will tell you. But if I can help, I will definitely make an effort to do so.
Great. We'll add that to the show notes. I want to thank you for joining us today and hope to have you back for a follow-up soon.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Investor Connect helps investors interested in startup funding. In this podcast series, experienced investors share their experience and advice. You can learn more at investorconnect.org. Halti Martin is the director of Investor Connect, which is a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to the education of investors for early stage funding. All opinions expressed by Hall in podcast guests are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinions of Investor Connect. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon for the basis of investment decisions.